All right, it's 2:30. We're going to kick this thing once I start my timer here. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am your friendly neighborhood sign guy. You'll see me with the big sign around the con. It's what I do. And we're going to talk about boats. Some context before we begin. The first question here that everyone in this room is currently asking themselves is, why is this guy in a kilt and a Hawaiian shirt talking to me about spaceships? So, I don't mean to brag, but I have played a lot of Kerbal Space Program in my time. Also, I got a master's in space systems operations, and I've spent some time on a ship or something. But come on, man. James T. Kirk's Sweet Ride is my magnum opus. This is my crowning achievement to the world. Look at that thing. That's like 30 mods worth of stuff there, and definitely didn't crash the game a lot. Anyway, so before we begin, we need to talk about some things here. First is what we're not here to do. We are not here to spend the next hours nitpicking existing IPs and why they're not realistic. That's boring, that's dumb, we have better things to do with our time. If you really want to do that, go watch Temple and Institute or Space Doc on YouTube. Have fun with that. The next thing we're not here for is we are not here to insist on 100% scientific accuracy in all things. It's called science fiction for a reason. Throw in the occasional space wizard, whatever. Have fun with this stuff. Brian, please read the last line on the slide.
That's great. So what are we going to do?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. So what we're here to do, the way episodes of Star Trek are written is the real writers, it's all you, work out the script, and when it's done, it has things in it like, Geordi, Captain, I've got a problem with the tech. I need about 5 minutes to lock it down. The script then goes to a very select group of uber nerds whose job is to fill in what goes in that tech flag. I am here to be that for you. So when you're committing authorship, or you're working on some indie game dev, or you're being DM and you need to figure out why your party needs to pull over at the next planet because their spaceship broke, I'm here to arm you to know that the reason they need to pull over is that it's a problem with the G diffuser system, or the wave motion engine, or whatever Han broke this time, who knows. And the way we're going to roll with this is, first we're going to talk about some general philosophy of ships, big brain, big picture stuff. Then we're going to start running through all the different subsystems that make up an actual spacecraft, which are listed here. All of these are colloquially and collectively known as the bus, because their job in life is they fly the payload from A to B. That's all they do. We will then very briefly talk about our payload. And since what we're building here is a space warship, our payload is the combat system. The weapons, sensors, and computers that let me put warheads on foreheads, kill bad guys, and break things. It's going to be brief. I will explain why later. At the end of each of these sections, except general philosophy, there will be a list of rhetorical questions for you to ponder as you think about whatever you're doing with spaceships and how it would work. And because I am a generous panelist, each of these question slides will include a picture of my dog. You're welcome. So let's roll into this. So general philosophy, the first thing you need to ask yourself for any given space boat, what's its purpose in life? Ships don't just appear full form from the ether. They were made for a reason, and they're not all going to be good at the same things because they're not built for the same things. What is this built for? What does it need to be good at? What does it not need to be good at? Closely related, who made this ship? This is more complex than it sounds like at first. It's not one person just conjures a ship up, not Tony Stark Iron Manning this. One person wrote the requirements and paid for it. A second person did the design work for this. A third one actually cut metal, bent steel, and put it together. And a fourth person then took it out for shakedown and figured out what was wrong with it. If you notice the three ninnies laughing in the front, yes, those are me and my three friends. Now, stay with me here. This gets even more complicated when it turns out that 3 of these 4 people are secretly cat girls. I paid an artist at New York Comic Con to make that picture. It was great. As an example of this, what you see here is USS Virginia and the Russian cruiser Slava, both guided missile cruisers, both about 10,000 tons displacement, both made in the mid-1970s, very clearly not from the same fleet, not doing the same purpose. Who designs this thing matters, and what they design it for matters. Other questions to ponder here that are just going to shape the general ship. Does it go in atmosphere? If so, outside looks really different. Do you have artificial gravity? If not, inside looks really different. Key question, always ponder this one. What happens when things go wrong? For the most part, all these systems, to quote Bethesda, it just works. Like when it's working, no one cares. The problem is when it breaks, what is the follow-on effects of this, and how does that affect how the rest of the ship goes? And then my final thought for you here, ships have long lives, 20, 30, 40 years. Having one throwaway sentence that, hey, those guys have the new Mark 7 fire control system, it can track things much better, adds so much world building for it. Put little defects in there because it doesn't quite work right, because different contractors built it, and rooms for upgrades, and suddenly it's such a rich, complex world from one sentence. Now let's jump in our subsystems here. First one we're going to talk about, structure. Structure, satellite terms, is the frame of it. It's an endoskeleton. That ring in the middle is the structure. Everything is attached to that and hangs off to that, and that is the thing that actually holds the satellite together. In a boat, it's the hull, which is more of an exoskeleton kind of thing. Everything's attached to the hull. The hull holds it all together as it moves around. The purpose of your structure is it holds everything together as forces are applied to the ship or the satellite. If you're moving in 3 dimensions, this is what moves and everything's attached to it, like your skeleton. And this gets a little complicated. Like, who likes armored ships? Big old battleships, lots of armor on them. Yeah, armor is not just making the hull thicker. Seen here, USS Texas, World War I era battleship with the armored plates pulled off, also the torpedo blisters. What you're seeing inside there is the actual hull. And then there's a void, and then there's layers of armor plate. Because when things explode, moving an explosion between mediums dissipates the force, and you're less likely to crack the hull open. This gets complicated. This is an armor diagram. I have no idea why it's written in Italian, but this is an armor diagram of the Iowa-class battleship. You don't need to read it. Just notice how many different colors are on there. It's not just one layer of armor. It gets weird, gets complex, gets fun. The other big job your structure has here is you need to protect the ship from radiation. We're going to talk a lot about this on a lot of different subsystems, how that affects it and why radiation is bad. But your hull's job is just hold it all out so everything inside doesn't get cooked. Because there's a lot of radiation out in space that does a lot of mean things. And while getting bombarded with cosmic rays may have given the Fantastic Four superpowers, for the rest of us, yeah, it's not good. So this one was kind of boring. I'm sorry. Its structure is just the hardest case. It only really matters when things go wrong. And when it goes wrong, okay, how's the ship holding together while I move and my engines are pushing me along and other things are happening? But speaking of things going wrong, let's briefly talk damage control here. I could go on from now until the con closes talking about damage control on ships, not notice that I haven't slept, haven't ate, and everyone left, 2 days ago. So we're going to keep this really brief. At the basic level that everyone here needs to understand, there are 3 ways you kill ships. Fire, flooding, and the Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo. There are a lot of different anti-ship weapons that work in a lot of different ways and have a lot of quirks and foibles and blah, 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 blah. All they're trying to do is burn the guts out, knock a hole in the side so it sinks, or just obliterate it in one shot. That's it. That's all it comes down to. And you need to have a plan for this ship. How do I put out fires? How do I keep the water out of the people tank? That's all it is. Put wet stuff on hot stuff. Keep water out of people tank. Or in case of space, put wet stuff on hot stuff. Keep the air in the people tank. You don't want to vent that all out. That'd be bad. Final thing to think about here with structure. Wreckage doesn't go anywhere. It's in space. It keeps floating. So back in the days of yore in the Roman days, ships were made out of very light woods, primarily fir. and they didn't actually sink. In battles, you'd ram them, you'd storm them, whatever. The ships would get waterlogged to the point they couldn't maneuver. You'd board them, kill the crew, and then tow the thing back home, repair it, and hey, I got another ship now. Same rules apply in space. Unless you're in a really weird orbital parameters, it's not going anywhere. It's still floating out there. Go grab it. Bring it home for scrap. You know, be space room. Go grab those things. Things ponder on structures. How's structure made? Is it internal, external? What's actually holding it together? What's getting motive force from the engines to the rest of the ship to drive it forward? How does everything inside here deal with forces being applied in 3 directions? An actual ship, everything's bolted down. Great. Actual satellites, everything's bolted down. You shake it at like 9 Gs at several thousand times a second to make sure it's going to hold together before you put it on top of its launch vehicle. You have armor? So how's it integrate into the hull? 'Cause again, this gets complex. It's trying to dissipate forces out. What's your plan for radiation? Really, really thick? Space magic? Special materials? Whatever? How are you going to make damage control work? Here, Frodo. Look at that little stink. He's so cute. Yeah, he's a cute. He's a stinker. Next up, thermal. I'm going to level with y'all. Thermal sucks. When I was in grad school doing my thesis, my thermal section was a size, weight, and power budget for a novel space system. My thermal section was 1 paragraph long that said I did a single node analysis. It needs more work. I'm a space ops guy. Go get an engineer. Thermal sucks. But we're going to talk about this. There are 2 problems I need to solve for thermal. The first, the smaller problem, is how do I keep the ship warm? If you are fans of XKCD and What If, they've already done a fantastic analysis as to why this isn't really a problem. There are very select cases where you need to keep it warm, when it goes in the shadow of the Earth, when you get too far away from a star and there's just not a lot of heat around, and the answer is space blankets. You wrap it up in insulating material. The main way you keep the ship warm is it just exists, and maybe occasionally you need some insulation. Turn on more stuff, it'll heat up. My bigger problem is trying to keep the ship cool. My problem here is ships are full of 2 things: people and electronics. People and electronics have 2 unfortunate things in common with each other. We make a lot of heat, and we really don't like being too hot. On a ship normally, I have an easy solution for this. I am sitting in an infinite heat sink called the ocean. I just dump all my excess heat there and life goes on. Unless you're in the Persian Gulf where the seawater around you is 88 degrees, which is not fun. It's great. But otherwise, it's easy. Space, it's not that easy. Spacecraft have really big radiators, seen here on the International Space Station circled in red. This has problems. My first problem with radiators, notice those are really, really big. And they don't work very well. There's like 3 people in there, and I got to keep them cool with those giant things. Also, if I'm trying to maneuver, that's a really long moment arm with inertia that's now going to get jerked around on its joint and may get ripped apart. Also, shocking news, there's no air in space. There's nothing to deaden out the motion if it starts wiggling back and forth, so it can just tear itself apart really easily. And this is a problem. This is a spacecraft design thing. If satellites need to orient really quickly, like NASA ones in deep space with big cameras on them, you can't have things sticking off like this. They'll just tear off. Oops. There is some degree of precedence for this. I have things on ships called towed array sonars that I drag behind me, and it affects how fast I can go, how much I can turn, like how I need to maneuver. Same kind of rules can apply here for your thermal system. It's also really, really big. That's going to increase your radar cross-section a lot. It's really easy to see this big thing sticking off of you. I have tactical implications here of how detectable am I. Or, my weapons make a lot of heat, how long I can keep shooting them before I overheat, because I don't want to stick this big thing out and get it shot off, and also limits my maneuverability. Whoops. Final problem, they don't really work well. Radiation sucks for getting rid of heat. Conduction, really good. Convection, really good. Radiation, sucks. I'm in space. There's no fluid for convection. There's nothing adjacent to me for conduction. Radiation's all I got. Poop. But it can affect how far off you go. Now, if we want to get some sci-fi on this, stick something in there that's a heat sink that then you kick over the side. Does it limit how long you can do stuff? Yeah. So does fuel, so does food, so does oxygen, whatever. It's another thing to track. It's a way to get around this. Things to ponder on this. How many keep boat warm? How many keep boat cool? Am I limited in how close and far I can get to the stars? If I get too close, I start to overheat because I can't dump out heat fast enough. If I get too far, I'm dumping out too much heat and I can't stay warm and everything freezes up. Do I have deployable things that affect this? If I have deployable things, how does that affect my maneuverability and other stuff? Am I limited how long I can hang in a fight before all my weapons are overheating and I gotta run away? Do I have deployable things I can do that? In Age of Wooden Ships and Iron Men, yeah, they had a lot of sails, and most of them went away in a fight, and you cut down to very specific sails that gave you the maneuverability you need, but weren't big and vulnerable and awkward. Same kind of rules could apply here. Does this make me more detectable because I have bigger area, less detectable because I'm cooler down? How does this work? Talk more about that later. Frodo, keeping nice and toasty warm. Yeah, look at him. He looks so cute in his little sweater. Now let's start getting into more fun ones. Propulsion. First, yes, space pirates could be a thing. Go for solar sails, yarhar fiddle-dee-dee, have fun, put some fantasy in your sci-fi. Who am I to tell you no? Aside from that, there's basically two ways to do this. You've got the single engine theory, which there is precedent for. It's called submarines. Yes, there's two turbines, but there's one reactor core, there's one shaft, there's one propeller. And this has some advantages to it. First, it's mechanically simple. There's less stuff. There's less things that can go wrong. I'm a fan of that. Also, you save a lot of size, weight, and power, which is what SWAP stands for, if I've only got the one thing there. Miku approves. There are some disadvantages with this as well, though. If I've only got one drivetrain, how am I going to do maintenance on this? And what happens if it breaks? In submarines, the answer is you just drive reliability through the roof, and they're super expensive. Like, frankly, that's what it is. And what happens if I break other parts of the ship? To move forward, I have to put my thrust vector through my center of mass. Otherwise, I'm going to move a different direction. I can set up the engine to do that really easily until parts start getting shot off, and now my center of mass is in a different place. And now my attitude control system needs to be smart enough to adjust that so I can fly sideways because I'm putting it through correctly. Life gets complicated. Because again, I don't have something else I can brace against. On a ship in the ocean, I just put my rudder over when I'm running on one engine and I keep driving straight. Can't do that here. Other answers have more than one engine. Ta-da! This is how most warships work. They all have more than one engine. Even things like the Oliver Hazard Perry frigate sure looks like one engine to me. No, it's not. Like a submarine, there's two turbines on there, so I can take one down for maintenance when I need to. But up forward, I've also got two auxiliary propulsion units, primarily designed for doing pier work, so I don't have to use a tug, and I can just move the ship on and off the pier on my own. But in an emergency, like when St. Wilbur Roberts backed over a mine and blew his propeller off, I can still maneuver with this, just at very low speeds. Advantages of this, first, engineering-wise, you may have limits on how big you can make an engine. I can only make one of these propellers so big before first it starts brushing up against the hull. So now the water being moved by the propeller is bouncing off the hull and it's causing interference and I'm losing a lot of my efficiency. Or you notice these aren't coming straight out, they're angling down slightly. That angle gets bigger and now my propeller is pushing the back end of the ship up rather than pushing it forward. So maybe that's why I need more than one engine. Also lets me balance center of thrust versus center of mass a lot easier if I have multiple engines pushing and I can control how much thrust is coming through each. I've got redundancy. It's more than one engine. If one breaks, cool, I've got another one right there. It's running right now. Disadvantages on this. First, most importantly, that's a lot of my size, weight, and power budget now. And, God, you guys made Miku cry. Look at you. Rude. But also, it's very mechanically complex. Like, unfortunately, I am cursed in this in life. When I look at shots like this in Star Wars, all I think is, oh my God, the maintenance trying to keep all 11 engines online. Dear God. There's precedent for this. USS Enterprise, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. We took the engineering plant off the Forrestal-class carriers and said, well, there's 8 boilers, 2 hard-mounted to each of the 4 shafts. Stick a reactor next to each of those boilers, call it a day. Woo! Lunch. Yeah, it had 8 reactor cores. It was great. Modern carriers have 2. And I now have much more complex piping of steam, so those two reactors can feed steam to any of the 4 shafts. There are trade-offs here. There is no free lunch. But it's where do I want more radioactive stuff? Do I want more steam that if there's a leak, it'll kill everyone in the space? These are decisions. Yeah, high-pressure steam. It will kill everyone in the space. It's not good. The way you detect a steam leak is you take a broom, you wave it in front as you walk down, and when the broom head goes, "Foop," isn't there anymore, you found the steam leak. Congratulations. Yeah. Things to ponder here on propulsion. Absolutely nothing. It's the same things as attitude control, so we're just saving it for that. Have a picture of Frodo. You're welcome. So, let's get into attitude control, aka how me change our satellite points. Or in ship terms, how boats steer. The most common way you're probably all familiar with is called a reaction control system. It's little baby engines pushing around. Seen here, little poofs coming off the Viper here. Or again, for my Kerbal aficionados, you're very familiar with these things. They're really strong. They work really well. Like, they do their job. But I've got some problems here. Where's my fuel coming from, and how do I get it there? On Apollo, the main engine and the RCS system had the same oxidizer, but different fuels. So now I have another tank of stuff that I really don't want getting out, and another set of piping getting it from A to B. And say, for example, on the good space battleship Yamato here, it has an RCS system. That's how it steers. Big old thrusters up on the bow, push it left, right. So what that means is I have pipes of combusting fuel going from the engine room in the back the entire length of the ship to the bow to make those work. 1, that's a lot of size, weight, and power. 2, that's now very inefficient because when I want to turn, there's a long delay to get it from A to B to do that. 3, if I start taking shots and one of those pipes burst opens, I'm now spewing burning fuel inside my ship. This is a bad idea. There are ways to deal with this. Would be have another engine up forward. Like on an actual ship, the whole bottom half's all engine rooms, and I have segregated out for damage control, so if one space gets blown up, only so much equipment goes. But you just need more engine stuff up forward that feeds your RCS stuff up forward, and one back aft feeding that one, so you limit how much piping you have going through. Now my fuel system needs to be more complex. Other problem, they're very imprecise. There is a minimum amount of thrust one of these can provide. Because the pipe's so big, and it takes so much time for that thruster to open and close. And there's a minimum of time it takes for it to open and close. During that time, a minimum amount of propellant comes through, and that minimum amount of propellant causes a minimum amount of thrust that I can't go below. Not good for precise maneuvering. On a giant-ass boat, less of an issue than satellites that need to point really precisely, but it's still a concern. My other answer here is reaction wheels and CMGs. Are there any aerospace engineers in the room? Okay, we are going to make a gentleman and gentlewoman's agreement here. You two and Robbie, and I know that reaction wheels and CMGs are very different things. But for purposes of this panel, Robbie, it doesn't matter for the layman here. They all work off of torque. Robbie. The deal here, wheel go spinny, make torque, satellite turn, equal opposite reaction. That's all it is. And the deal here, incredibly precise. I can point this thing exactly where I want to, and they run off electricity. So now instead of big pipes carrying flammable stuff, I have a cable. Electricity will still start fires and kill people, but easier to shut down and much less size, weight, and power taken up by that. Problem? Not very effective. Reaction wheels are not strong. CMGs are incredibly strong, but incredibly slow. You're not turning quickly. It'll turn the International Space Station, but not fast. Final answer here, thrust vectoring. Change how it pointy coming outy. Ta-da. It's simple. So my exit nozzle is a different shape, and I need some motors there to drive it around. But in isolation is not terribly useful because that means to turn and to go forward. Orbital parameters are not fun for things like that. It gets very complicated very quickly, and it's hard to keep everything in balance. And the final thing we're going to talk about here, for both this and propulsion, your exhaust is visible. For those like me who are old and enjoy the original Battlestar Galactica, you've seen things like this a lot. That's visible. Stealth is more than just radar. That puts out a lot of heat and a lot of visible light, and that can't get you detected. I have things on ships at the top there. That thingamabob is called a bliss cap. And its job is, as hot exhaust comes out, outside air merges in and mixes with it and diffuses it out, so now I have a lower temperature, more diffuse exhaust plume. Notice on the stealth bomber at the bottom, the exhaust there is not at the back of the plane. There's still room for it to kind of spread out and break up before someone on the ground looking up with IR stuff can see it coming out. Makes it less visible. Things to ponder. Speaking of, let's ponder some questions. What's my engineering plan here? What's it look like? How am I doing maintenance on it? What's my plan there? What happens if it breaks? What's my attitude control system? What's it good at? What's it bad at? It's not going to be good at everything. Well, it can, and then it's bad at being cheap and easy to make. Cost is a thing. Is it tied into the main engines? Is it completely independent? Is it a little of each? Do I have RCS from the main engines, but also reaction wheels? Could be. Now we have Frodo with a very odd attitude control situation. He sleeps laying like that. He thinks it's comfy. I don't know. Twerp. All right, comms. Who likes spreadsheets? Yeah, we're going to talk about link budgets. No, we're not. I would not do that to you, for the love of God. Big thing to think about here, big antenna move versus big ship, move. Does this sound familiar? I feel like we've been here before. Have we been here before? Yeah, we're back, baby. So, there is precedent for things like this. Maybe my antenna is something deployable. Submarines, their long-range communication is something they spool out the back when they need to use it. On ships, again, back to my total array sonars, I can have ones that both transmit and receive or just receive. Maybe your receive antenna is small enough that it doesn't really affect anything, so I can get orders from home, but if I want to talkie-talkie back, I need to put out the big one that then makes me not able to maneuver and very visible. Oh, speaking of, remember when we talked about visibility of things? Yeah, we're back, baby. So here's the deal. Antenna gain sucks if you're trying to stay stealthy, because it works both ways. If your antenna is concentrating your signal and it happens to go past someone who's listening, they will hear it. Also, even if you're not transmitting, if your antenna is pointed towards me, just like it concentrates your transmission, it concentrates my radar bouncing off of you, so I get a much stronger return coming back. Which means your opponent then says, I think there's a thing over there. And then they start investigating, and then it's game on. Look, it's not a panel if there's not at least one JoJo reference. Final one here, do I have lag time in this? Star Trek is my favorite on this because they play a super fast and loose episode to episode. It changes whether there's lag time or not to fit the plot, but whatever, man. It's Star Trek. It does what it wants. Things to ponder whether this is a factor or not. Then that radiation thing. We need to talk about that radiation thing. Yeah, we're back, baby. The sun's mean. It puts out a lot of radiation across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And it's going to interfere with this a lot, depending on what mood it's in and how close you are to the planet. Whether you're inside of the Van Allen belts, outside the Van Allen belts, outside the heliopause in interstellar space, yeah, if you're pointing towards a star trying to transmit, you're going to, good luck. Trying to receive, you're not going to see anything. You're just going to get interference. There are issues here. Things to ponder on this. It's my short-range comms plan. It's my long-range comms plan. Do I need to deploy something out to make either of these work? If I deploy this out, does this make me more vulnerable because I can't maneuver because I'm more visible? Because it takes a lot of power? Space weather going to be a problem on this? Frodo would like to communicate that he wants to go to bed now, please. Yeah, you such a widow stink. All right, power. We're going to talk about how do we generate power. Personally, my favorite answer is just yell, I have the power, and roll with life. The way you do this for realsies is radioisotope thermoelectric generators, where I use decay of radioactive particles to make heat. I convert heat to electricity, away we go. Or I got solar panels, Or I got fuel cells. It's a generator. You burn stuff, you get electricity out of it. Or just yell space magic and roll with it. Like, in real life, we don't have things with enough energy density to make any of the sci-fi stuff work. Just yell space magic and say it's a reactor core. Go with it. More important things to ponder here. Your redundancy and your load management. Yeah. Ships, satellites, everything has so many redundancies built into alternate power paths, alternate sources, alternate routes, yada, 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 to keep this stuff working. Because it's all full of electronics, and electronics don't like losing power. It makes them sad. So you don't let that happen. And load management. Can you turn everything on at once? How many generators do I need to have on to run what part of the equipment there? Which again gets back to how often I need to do maintenance on those generators. So how often can I not have everything running? I sit through entire hour-long meetings of my life figuring this out every week on the ship. It's great. Where are my electrical engineers? Splendid. So you know as well as I do. We're in space here. Where's the ground? How am I grounding my system? Yeah, ungrounded electrical systems are thrilling to work with. When it should ground, it keeps running and it will light on fire. So when a ground's detected, you drop everything and you find the ground before it burns the ship to the waterline. It's great. Remember space weather, radiation, all that? Yeah, baby. So there is a lot of stuff out there that causes a lot of charged particles to fly around. Electrical distribution systems don't like dealing with charged particles. And again, where you are affects this a lot. Real talk, actual satellites up in GEO outside the protection of the Van Allen radiation belts where they get the full brunt of the sun, when a solar storm is coming, you turn them off. And then you wait for the solar weather to clear and you turn them back on and hope nothing fried. Because if you leave it on, the solar panel is going to overcook and it's going to arc into it and it's going to fry everything and it's going to die. Yeah. Back in the 1960s, there was this thing called Starfish Prime, where for various reasons, there were actual good reasons, but we just chucked a nuke up to a couple hundred kilometers altitude and detonated it. The answer was we wanted to see if the Soviets could launch it up and hide it in the Van Allen belt, which is a belt of radiation around the Earth that traps all of the radiation coming from the sun and why we don't die from X-rays and gamma rays. And the answer was we fried 1/3 of all satellites on orbit, and 800 miles away in Hawaii, you could see the aurora borealis. We also knocked out Honolulu's phone grid. Charged particles in space are mean. Things to think about here. How am I making power for my ship? Even if you're going to declare space magic, like, give it a name and some throwaway lines about how it works. Do some world building here. Give yourself some plot hooks to work on. Oh, yeah, fusion's totally going to work. We're definitely going to get that rolling any day now. Do you have margin? Can I turn everything on at once and still have extra power to spare?
Remember what I said about upgrades?
Leave room for that. Do I have load management issues where, okay, if I'm in this power configuration, I can only run these systems at once? No, I can't have the radar going full blast and the sonar going full blast and the heaters and VLS going full blast. It's not going to work. I'm going to drop power. Oh, speaking of, if I have more load than power, what's my plan for load shed to keep the ship alive, and what's my restoration plan? This is where the ship says, oh, bother, I've got too many things running. I'm going to automatically turn off this, and this. So I keep the generators and the fuel and the lube oil system alive so I don't die and I can keep making power and then slowly bring things back up. It's great. What's my restoration plan to bring everything back up afterwards? Our final question on this, why is space weather so mean all the time? Jesus! Frodo would also like to know the answer to this, pondering the evils of space magic. He also just hates looking at cameras, won't do it. He's a little turd. All right, let's talk payload. We all want to get tactical. It's not quite right. There we go. That's more like it. So, my carefully considered answer for all of you as a professional space nerd and a professional missile nerd who does this for a living and spends way too much time thinking about it is just make it up. Seriously, there are too many unknowns here of, well, what are the rules? What physics are we keeping? What physics are we bending? What technology is advancing? Where are we? What's the environment? No matter how accurate you try to make this, some nerd is going to pop up yelling that's not how it would actually work, and then they're going to send you the Inquisition to get executed for heresy. So, for the record, actually a very nice lady, but like she shot my Cthulhu. Come on, rude. Key principles I do have for you. Sensors are crucial. If you watch a lot of people talking about tactical stuff, you'll see a lot of stuff about, well, this weapon has this range and this coverage and, this much damage and blah, 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 this many, feet per second muzzle velocity, yada, yada. I don't care. That level detail needs to go into your sensors. Once I found the target, killing it's easy. I care a lot more, when can I detect them? When can I develop a fire control quality track? When can they detect me? When can they develop a fire control quality track? What can I do to find them without being found myself? Because if I can't find the target, I can't hit the target. It's all downhill after that. Electronic warfare is mean. Melts your brain. Super duper complicated. Here's my summary on it that all of you need to understand. Missiles are dumb. They go to a box and they hit a shiny thing. That's it. So what do I do about this? I make myself less shiny. I put something shinier than me in the box. Or I move outside the box. That's it. That's electronic warfare. Is anyone here's life dream to be the lead dev on Seeker Logic Simulators 25? We should talk afterwards so I can dissuade you for that. For the rest of you, the deepest you should ever absolutely go in that is this chart right here I made. Think no further, please. I will happily email this to anyone who wants it. Notice this is all very simple stuff because it's not that complicated. Once you get into, well, this missile does a left to right scan and has a forward to aft bias and this pulse width and this frequency repetition, blah, 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 it all gets super complicated, but the base principles don't change. As I said, talk to me afterwards, I'll email it to you. And our section here I'm calling Is It Worth? So we get into different weapon systems, different tactics, different blah, 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 blah. They'll all probably work. The question is, do they work better than an equal investment in something else? That's what matters. Carriers probably aren't the end-all be-all in spaceboat technology. Are they useful? Yeah, possibly. Are they the single-point destroyer of worlds? Nuh-uh. Here's why. The advantage of carrier-based aircraft, and aircraft in general, is that they're expendable. There's 1 or 2 people in the plane versus 300 or 400 on a ship. Cool. They can carry weapons capable of sinking a ship. Cool. And they move through the air, ships move through the water, so those planes move an order of magnitude faster. Ship move about 20 to 30 knots, plane move 300 to 400 knots. Well, we're all in space now. Are they still expendable? Yeah, probably. Can they still carry anti-ship weapons? I would be delighted to hear your physics explanation of why they can't, but probably yes. Do they still move an order of magnitude faster than the big boats? Oh, yeah, no, that doesn't work anymore. Oh. So they probably have a role, but they're probably not the end-all, be-all like they have been on Earth, where your job is to protect the carrier and the carrier will send the air wing out to kill everything for me. Missiles get complicated. I don't have air to push against. I don't have aerodynamic forces. So how am I can yeet a missile out to the general area where the target is. Once the seeker turns on, how do I get it to do the maneuver to actually get and hit the target? Among other things, yeah. You need a lot of margin of fuel and stuff there, which now makes my missile very big, and that is size, weight, and power. That is not warhead. Also, in naval combat here, missiles go a couple hundred to a couple thousand knots and smack into the side of a ship and go boom. For the most part, I don't need them to go boom. I just need to smack in there and scatter burning rocket fuel everywhere. That's what happened to Stark. He got hit by 2 missiles, didn't detonate. They scattered burning fuel everywhere. Also happened to HMS Coventry during the Falklands War. And that started fires back to damage control. Now the ship's not fixed in place. It has its own orbital parameters that may or may not line up with my missile. So I could be smacking into it at several thousand kilometers a second, or I could be slowly overtaking on the freeway and just lightly tapping the side. This gets complicated. And finally, my favorite part, because I'm very proud of the chart I'm about to show you. Lasers have time of flight. Speed of light is not instantaneous. Let's look at this and crunch some numbers, shall we? So, I have a ship that needs to die for whatever arbitrary reason. And it is sitting in low Earth orbit, about 700 kilometer altitude, because most things in low Earth orbit are about 700 kilometer altitude. Also makes some math easy here in a minute. And I'm going to shoot it from the surface of the moon, from geostationary orbit, and from the surface of the Earth. From the moon, that is about 380,000 kilometers. That laser shot takes 1.25 seconds to get to my target. We're not even counting the time it needs for me to detect them and see where they're going. During that time, my target moves 9.25 kilometers, longer than a 40K battleship, about 6 times the length of an Imperial Star Destroyer, about 14 times the length of the Enterprise D. I gotta lead the target just a little bit. Oh, by the way, it also took 1.25 seconds for my radar detection on them to come back to me for me to see where they are and build fire control quality track, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it's a little extreme. Let's drop it down to geostationary orbit, 35,786 kilometers. Or, because we're at 700 kilometer altitude, about 35,000 kilometers away. So I told you I made the math easy. There, my time of flight is about 0.116 seconds. That's a lot less. That still moves 860 meters. That's still longer than the length of the Enterprise D. Still got to lead my target. Okay, let's say I'm shooting from the surface, about 700 kilometers. 0.02 of a second time of flight. Still moves a little over 17 meters. That's longer than an X-Wing and about 3 times the length of a Type 6 shuttle. That's the one you most often saw in Next Generation Voyager. Still got to lead my targets. This gets complicated. So things to ponder here on this. What are my rules? Like, what physics are we keeping? What are we ignoring? Set the rules and then adapt your tactics to the rules. Please don't do the other way around. That's how we get dumb things and lack of suspension of disbelief and it all goes off the rails. Key follow-on question. Does everyone follow the same rules? Technology advances. Start of World War II, the Japanese were kicking our butts because they were very proficient at night fighting. They trained immensely on it. And then we started putting radar on all our ships, and now we can see exactly where they are from 20 miles away while they're waiting to actually get to visual range, and we clean their clocks. The rules can change. What sensors do you have? Come on, baby. How do those sensors tie into the weapons? How do I get data from my detection to my weapon? How do I close this loop? What's my fleet look like? Is it battleships? Is it carriers? A bunch of smaller ships? Do I have space wizards in there throwing magic spells or whatever? Is it some combination of the above? I don't know. You tell me. Frodo prefers the Sith approach, personally. And because this is our last section and I am a generous panelist, here's a second picture of Frodo. All right, that being said, what questions we got? Yes.
I was wondering, like you had thermal pilot earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and that's and the liquid you mentioned. Can you also use that to, is that like a whole section where you can vent that use what you can to keep keeping like this if the thermal liquid you're using like
Mm-hmm. So the question was, if I have a medium that I'm dumping all my heat into and then kicking over the side, could I use that to reheat part of the ship before I kick it out? Is that an accurate summary? The answer is yes. Generally, I don't need to, though. The ship is just making enough heat on its own. From just the people and the equipment in there, I need to get rid of heat. I don't need to save it outside some very specific things. Like satellites have it when they pass through the shadow of the Earth. Suddenly the temperature craters because they're not getting pounded by, 1.38 kilowatts per square meter of energy from the sun. So generally, it's not a problem of keeping it warm. I just need to get rid of all my excess heat. There's another question back here. We'll start in the back.
Hi there. I wanted to ask about, so on the slide where you talked about the 3 advantages.
Uh-huh.
Like, on the slide where you asked
Yep.
about the 3, advantages of smaller ships versus larger ones, like carriers, etc. The third point about order of magnitude difference in speed.
Mm-hmm.
Surely mass times acceleration is the amount of power required to move around. So would there still be some element of that, or am I missing something?
So the question was here for fighters and bombers, can't they accelerate a lot quicker? And the answer is yes, they can accelerate much faster, but they also have much lower propulsion, and their top speed isn't going to be that much different. This is why there's still some value in them of like maneuvering and, keeping close to mom and that, but they're not going to run out 10 times faster than my bigger ship and then come back. You see this in like an aircraft carrier, biggest thing out there, it takes a while to get up to speed. The thing can outrun like basically anything else on Earth. Like they go fast. It's due to a number of factors there. But like a speedboat goes up really, really fast. And then over the long haul, I'm going to leave it in the dust because I have more gas than them and more propulsion. It just takes me longer to get up to speed. So there's a roll, but it's not 500 miles an hour versus 30 miles an hour. Right? Yeah, guy with the sweater on, I think. As long as I don't have to do the math, it's fine. Mm-hmm. So the question was, what about a cold-blooded species? And the answer is there you may have a problem. It depends on how much electronics you have, because all your equipment around you also makes a lot of heat. On a ship, I have a number of, they're called skids, don't ask me why, big heat exchangers to pull heat off of stuff. And radars, computers, all that generates a lot of heat that you would then just need to have your environmental control system able to route that heat around to properly keep your temperature where you want it. And it may affect how much you turn on, turn off. And then,
how do you deal with the 2 extra axes of movement as opposed to a regular ship where you're sliding around a plane as opposed to going up and down and being able to like straight?
So the answer is, how do I deal with the extra 2 axes now moving in 3 dimensions instead of on a flat surface? The answer is, I already deal with that because there's a thing called waves. The ship moves a lot. Here in the normal people world, you want DirecTV, your satellite dish is hard bolted to the side of your house. It points directly at the one satellite and it never moves. On a ship, everything's gyroscopically stabilized because as I have my antenna here and as the ship rocks back and forth, the antenna needs to move around to counter it and stay aligned properly. So my fields of coverage are slightly more complex, but it's a difference of scale, not a difference of kind, because boats move a lot.
More specifically, I was asking about like maneuvering in 3 dimensions.
So the specific clarification there was maneuvering, and that is, it will get more complicated, but it's not unheard of. Planes do that. It's just you don't have a big force pulling you in one specific direction. Like we've mostly solved this, actual spacecraft deal with this. It's just hard. Buzz Aldrin's doctoral dissertation was the math of how to do a orbital rendezvous and get 2 ships together so they can dock. Yeah, there's a reason he was on Apollo 11. All right, we'll get to this cluster here, but you, sir.
So 2 points. First off, a fiction recommendation for anybody that wants to dive more into everything this panel's talked about, relation space. It's perfect. So 2, hopefully not too squishy questions about some of the stuff that wasn't covered. First off, compute power and datacom. How does that actually kind of have to evolve to accommodate very different sensor inputs, outputs going to different systems, all these things getting integrated? How do you kind of build in something beyond binary computing, Star Trek and quantum aerial, Lovecraft, quantum? And because you mentioned Voyager, I have to ask, how do you deal with the delta in supplies that the crew consumes all the time, water, food, assuming it's not full total recycling? So in other words, how do you account for the meal stack?
So the 2 questions here were first compute, and the answer is get more computers. Like the degree of compute power on ships now is insane, and it's only getting insaner. Yeah, we're talking computer suites in the thousands of cores. So yeah, it's just that's part of your upgrade plan there is every so often you got to rip out the old computers, put in the new ones that are better, and then rewrite all your software code to run on the new software and interface with the old systems you didn't upgrade because you're not going to rip out the whole thing at once, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ship upgrades are great. The second question was supplies, and the answer is you got to make pit stops for supplies, frankly. Like ships do this now. Ships have done this since the dawn of time. Right now, my main limiting factor on ships is, fuel, because I got to burn fuel. in the days of wooden sailing ships where I'm powered by wind and there's infinite wind out there, my limiting factor was water to keep the crew alive. At some point, you got to pull over and get more stuff, and you need a logistics train to keep them alive because you're going to run out. All right, we'll start front and work our way back. You, sir.
So we've all talked about this in terms of mechanical ships with,
Mhm.
with organic crews.
Squishy boys, yep.
How does the taking the mechanical parts and making them organic change it?
So the question here is, how does making this organic change it? And my answer to that is I generally describe ships and satellites for that matter. They're basically like a body already, where it's, I don't need to blow the thing up to kill it. Just like if you wanted to kill me, you don't need to destroy all of me. You need to put one round through the heart and I fall over dead. Or you put one through like the stomach and it's going to take a while for me to die, but I'm going to die. Like you need the whole thing to work in order to make this work. And satellites are the same way, where if any one of these subsystems starts having issues, it's going to die. And so it's just kind of biological equivalence to it. You have some method of propulsion. I don't know how that part would work, but there are ways, I guess. And like, digestive system, respiratory, all that just on a bigger scale. And it still functions basically the same. Species 8472, yes, you're welcome. All right, so you good, sir.
Would there be a feasibility for magnetic-based weapons? Either forcing your enemy ships to hit that spot one, or maybe, if I can connect enough mass to my enemy ship, basically
So the question was about magnetic weapons, and the answer is sure. If you've got the energy to do it, like that's going to be your limiting factor of how do I concentrate this and how do I get enough power out to do it. Which gets to the power generation system trying to make this happen. We just don't have the energy densities. Like, sure, I could generate a big enough magnetic field and, in theory, concentrate on something. But now we're at Goku channeling the Spirit Bomb saying, people of Earth, give me your energy. So you need to solve that problem, but sure, go for it. Why not? All right. Lady right here.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about the electronics or power and how if it's not grounded, it can be kind of messy. Is there any way to artificially ground things, or how does that artificial grounding?
So the question was, how do I deal with the ungrounded systems where I'd artificially ground it? And the answer is not really. I have a lot of ground fault detectors along the line, and as soon as a ground is detected, you go piece of equipment by piece of equipment on whichever section of your power system has it, just called switchboards on the ship. And okay, everything that draws power from that, one by one, you either switch it to an alternate power source or you shut it down until eventually you turn off something and the ground goes away. Hey, we found where the ground is. Go fix it before we turn this back on and it lights the ship on fire. That's basically how you deal with it. It's great. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about cool spaceships. Let's talk about procurement.
Oh boy, everyone loves acquisitions and logistics. Woo! We're going to make such a big spreadsheet out of this.
So the Space Force is currently under the Air Force, but the Navy are the guys who have experience procuring and qualifying naval reactors and sending people out on long-position big pressure vessels to fill with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the year 2070, we need to send a ship to do a fun-up around the moon. How are we squaring the circle?
So the question was here, I think, in short, is why Space Force with Air Force and not Navy? And the answer is politics and bureaucracy. I'm just saying, no one cares about, Colonel Kirk and Major Spock. Just throwing that out there. No clue. We're going to get there eventually, but we don't have the capability to really put, manned military things in space yet, so we'll have to solve that when we get there. They'll take a lot of knowledge from us, but that'll be a project. Mm-hmm.
How would you factor in general space stuff, where space is no longer a void, if you're flying through a cloud of space dust, or you're flying through a meteor shield or
Shower.
cluster of meteors, the same way that you would have to navigate around an iceberg.
So the question here was, what about the stuff in space? The short answer is there is shockingly little stuff in space. Even the densest part of the asteroid belts, we're talking about single-digit number of things per square or cubic mile. Like, it's all empty up there. And so we haven't really had anything have to deal with that kind of stuff enough to know. The closest we have is a number of probes going through, specifically Jupiter has a beast of a magnetic field that's very challenging to deal with and get signals in and out through and have your stuff not cook in the magnetic field because it traps all the radiation in there. But for actually like driving through different things and driving around, not a lot. The one thing I'd say is there are some stuff with maneuvering satellites when there's debris coming through. The Space Force does basically what you can think of as the FAA's job for space traffic control, and will tell Planet Labs and Digital Globe and DirecTV, hey man, some debris is going to pass within so close of this satellite of yours at this time. You might want to do something about that. And they will choose to either accept the risk or maneuver out of the way or whatever. But that's about all we've got so far. We just don't know. We haven't had to deal with it. We don't know. Never done it. The closest thing are some NASA things that fly in the upper part of the atmosphere, and it just causes drag. Here's the thing. The atmosphere, it's satellites up to about 1,000 kilometers altitude, you still take atmospheric drag into account. But other than that, it's it's eventually going to deorbit, and you're going to need to reboost it. And again, where you have projections sticking off it, that will then cause drag and cause it to reorient ways you don't want. So you either need to adjust that or put a really strong attitude control system on it that can keep it flying straight. But that's about all we got. Other than that, we just don't know.
So with, we're talking about stealth detection and things.
Yep.
But with new technologies like quantum radar, where it uses entanglement particles out of objects, do you see any way within our squishy sci-fi scenario ships to protect against, quantum radar or just general countermeasures for it?
So the question was, what about quantum radar stuff with quantum entanglement of particles? And the answer is, I don't know. Say you've got quantum stealth on it, whatever. Base principles, for the most part, stealth doesn't make your radar beam go away. It just makes it go a different direction so it doesn't go back to the receiver. So if you can set up some kind of interference pattern there with the entanglement so they just don't see what they think they see. There's theories of it practically just doesn't work. Again, we don't have the power. But in theory, you could make a plasma field, stick it in front of something, and no one can see it because plasma does mean things to radar. And you could just fly a plane around completely stealthy because nothing's going to make it back to the transmitter. No one has the power to make that happen. There are theory things, but I don't have a lot. Right, and you, and then we're probably going to run out of time, and the guy back there is going to yell at me. So you, good sir.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, okay. So generally my understanding of modern day rockets is it takes a lot of power, fuel, and equipment to actually escape the orbit of a planet due to gravity and atmospheric drag and all the other forces that are going to stop you from regularly leaving. Commonly in sci-fi, we see ships that are built for entry, re-entry, and leaving the planet repeatedly and do not drop off pieces. What kind of developments in both shielding and fuel technology would be necessary for that to even be possible?
The question was, how do I make single stage to orbit work, basically? And the answer is you need better density of energy in fuels. That's really what it comes down to. You look at even ships from sailing ships to first generation steam power to modern stuff, and boy howdy, back in the days of wooden ships, going 6 knots was running real fast. And yeah. And then first generation steam plants, you could go about 9 knots because there was only one boiler, and then we went to triple expansion, and suddenly, holy cow, it runs forever. There are ways to do it, but the main answer is your energy density of your fuel, so you can just run it full burn continuously. Shielding, not so much. It's just atmospheric drag is a problem. Drag produces friction. Friction produces heat. Heat is bad. But that's because you're bleeding off so much orbital velocity. If I just have infinite fuel energy, propulsion basically, I can just slow myself down, and then I just gently waft down through. Because the issue isn't I'm flying through the air. The issue is I'm flying through the air at 17,000 kilometers a second. And so if I slow down and then just let it land gently, the heating issue goes away. It's just I don't have a fuel that will get enough thrust per unit of mass to do this, and that's the development I need. At some point in my life, because we have 15 seconds left, so it's time for another question, I did do another massive spreadsheet where I did the math on a drop pod of salt and how I can make it work. And the answer is, it can work. Drop from 120 kilometers, it'll be fine. The pod will survive re-entry. The people will survive re-entry. It'll do it. I did the math. All right, that is time, I believe. So thank you all.